Hey guys, this is Blue Forest. I hope you're doing well. So today we're doing part 3 of the SIG 100 list, where we're taking a look at each SIG in the game by class. We're doing an overview, taking a look at what each SIG looks like at very low level, and then again at SIG 100 to give you a good idea of what these bots look like once they have maxed out SIGs, so that you can make more informed decisions about who to feed those very precious signature programs to. We'll also take a look at things like activation rate, because of course some SIGs are easier to use, activate more often than others, and so forth. Now I will say, today we're going to do the tech class, and one thing about the tech class is that these are mostly circumstantial SIGs. This is a bit unique to the tech class because a lot of these are healing SIGs, which of course require you to take damage, and several of them are also very RNG based. With that said, we are going to dive in, and we're going to start with Wheeljack. So Wheeljack has his Force Shield, of course, which activates up to 3 times per fight at 75, 50, and 25% health. When the Force Shield activates, he will take no damage for a period of seconds, so long, of course, as this is not DOT, right? So things like bleed, shock, burn, and so forth will penetrate the shield, but all normal attacks will not. At SIG 1, his shield will activate for 2 seconds each time. That goes up to 8 seconds at SIG 100. So it does scale in the sense that it becomes 4 times as long. If you were to have a SIG 100 Wheeljack, you would have a total of 24 seconds of shield time if you were to lose a lot of health in the fight. Now, the thing about Wheeljack is that he is really the only bot in the game that greatly benefits from Nano Repair. The Nano Repair Mastery, which of course will give you up to a minute of Force Shield time if you have it ranked up. And so the question of whether to invest in his SIG or not, well, it's a tricky one because you have to think about Nano Repair. Now, generally with Nano Repair, you have to make that decision very carefully because it really does only benefit him. And you have to use a lot of defensive points in order to unlock it. And it's generally not a good idea to use a lot of mastery points just to benefit one bot. But if Wheeljack is one of your top bots, you use them all the time, particularly in difficult fights. So there are people that do very high level AMs who use Nano Repair. If you're doing LOC 2 or 3, you might want to use it. It's a very circumstantial decision. So if he is your top bot, you use him constantly, you'd probably be better off just using Nano instead of potentially spending years trying to get his SIG up to very high level. Now, the good thing is that regardless of Nano Repair, even at low SIG, even if you only have 2 to 3 seconds for the shield to activate, that's still going to be very, very helpful. It's a very useful SIG because it basically just saves you when you make a mistake or when you get into trouble. Because even at low SIG, it'll be enough to help you through one combo or a single big hit, right? So if you were to eat a non-DOT special that was going to take you from, say, 80% to 20% health otherwise, well, with the shield, you would just go from 80 to 75. That's it. It would save you. And so that's really what the SIG is for. You can't over-rely on it. You can't just stand there and let yourself get beat up constantly. But regardless of Nano Repair, it will certainly help you out. The Nano Repair decision really is mostly for very experienced players who use Wheeljack constantly. So I think for most players, because it's a circumstantial SIG, you obviously have to take damage. Low to mid SIG level is going to be perfectly fine. Duping him a couple of times, maybe getting that shield up to a 3 to 4 second duration is going to be more than adequate, and then only using Nano Repair if you're using him constantly in very high level fights. But it's a very good SIG regardless. So that brings us to Ratchet. So Ratchet has his Emergency Repair, unsurprisingly a healing SIG. So with Emergency Repair, Ratchet has a chance to repair all damage taken in the previous 4 seconds when he is hit with a big hit. So one that's dealing more than 120% of the opponent's attack rating, right? So this is only going to activate with specific hits, particularly with big hits. And of course, that's the purpose, because you can heal all of that damage taken, which can be very helpful. The thing is, though, it's very much an RNG-based SIG. So at SIG 1, he has a 10.5% chance to heal, and that goes up to a 60% chance to activate emergency repair at SIG 100. So it does scale, but you have to remember that even at SIG 100, it's not going to activate all the time, and it will only activate regardless when you're eating particular big hits. Now, the thing about this SIG is that even though it will generally have a pretty low activation rate, and in some fights it won't activate at all, is the fact that it's actually totally fine because Ratchet has multiple ways to heal. He can already heal with his Special 2, with his heavies when he drops below 50%. He's got many ways to heal already, so you don't need this to be high SIG. And because it is an RNG-based SIG that maxes out at 60%, most people will not really find any need to invest a lot into it. And like I said, that's totally fine, given that he has several other ways to heal already. This is very RNG-based, and for the most part, it's not going to trigger much. So having him awakened, obviously a very good idea, but even at SIG 5, SIG 10, it'll just be there to occasionally save you when you eat a big hit. So that brings us to Blaster. So Blaster has his Absorption Shield, which has a few components. It actually has 3. So first of all, when he's shielded, which he gets, he's blocking, and the duration of that can be increased with his amp charges. When he is shielded, he will shrug off the impact of ranged attacks, of energy attacks. He will have 20% energy resistance, further reducing that energy damage by 20%, and he will have a chance to heal. So he can heal on energy attacks only, not melees, but energy attacks will have a 40% chance to heal 7% of the opponent's attack rating. This is at SIG 1. That amount is doubled to 14% for special attacks, okay? At SIG 100, the healing, which is the only part of this SIG that's affected by SIG level, would go up to 17%, which of course would be 34% on special attacks. And so the thing about Blaster's SIG is that on the one hand, it activates all the time because the energy resistance, the shrugging off of damage is the same at lower high SIG, and that's very, very useful. You see this all the time when you fight against him, right? He's taking significantly less damage, and a lot of that ranged damage, that energy damage. It's only the healing that's getting stronger. So again, most people will not feel any need to invest a lot into him because the chance to heal is always going to be 40%, right? So more often than not, it's not going to happen. It will happen occasionally. And since it only goes from 7% to 17%, a little bit more than doubles, you really don't need to spend a lot of time investing into a SIG because you're going to get that reduced energy damage and the shrugging off of energy damage anyway. So it's one that's really good actually at low SIG. You really do not need to have it at high SIG in order for it to benefit you because the healing is only going to be a 40% chance. So that brings us to Mirage. So he has KERS, the Kinetic Energy Recovery System. So this gives him a special buff whenever he uses a special for a duration of time. And the buff changes depending on the special that you use. I really like this SIG because it activates very frequently because you're getting one of these buffs every time he uses a special. So with the special 1, he is getting faster projectiles for 2.3 seconds. His special 2, he's getting unblockable basic melees for 2.3 seconds. And of course, his special 3, he is getting a whopping 90% attack boost also for 2.3 seconds. The duration of these buffs goes up to a whopping 19 seconds at SIG 100. So, I mean, that's almost an 8-fold increase. It's roughly an 8-fold increase from SIG 1 to SIG 100. They become significantly longer at very high SIG. And there's a couple reasons why I really like this. One, of course, is the high activation rate, but also is the fact that the special buffs that he gets work in tandem with the buffs that he already gets when he uses specials, right? With the special 1, he gets that power burn, right? So with the SIG, you're getting the faster projectiles. That means you have a higher chance to land that power burn on the opponent. With the special 2, he can end up stunning because of the attack debuffs he's getting, so that will work in tandem with the unblockable melees. And then, of course, his special 3 gives him the permanent 15% attack boost whenever he is dodging or sidestepping specials, so to get that plus the 90% attack boost is also awesome. So Mirage's SIG is very well integrated into his kit, and so if you like Mirage, if you use him a lot, this is very much a SIG worthwhile investing in, because obviously at SIG 1, 2 seconds, 3 seconds, that's not a lot of time to work with. You don't have to have it at SIG 100. Even at mid-SIG level, if you're able to get up to 5 to 10 second windows, that's plenty of time to do more damage, and it's super useful. All of the buffs are helpful. You want to use different buffs depending on the fight that you're in. So this is an excellent SIG, high activation rate, and very worth pouring SIGs into if he's one of your top bots, because you're going to end up getting quite long periods of time to work with those buffs that you are getting. So that brings us to Soundwave. So he has this sonic shield. This has 2 components. The first that a lot of people actually don't know about is the fact that when his sonic shield is active, which of course he is getting with his power gain is passive, quite different than a lot of other bots. Every time he gains a bar of power, his shield is activating and he's getting 35% energy resistance, so he's taking a lot less damage on range shots. And then at SIG 1, he has just over a 16% chance to reflect ranged shots. Now, when he reflects, he takes no damage, and when the shots reflect, he deals the attack for 140% of the original damage, which means that if you successfully reflect a shot, it will deal more damage than if it had hit you, okay? Now, at SIG 100, the reflect range chance goes up to 90%, so it does scale significantly. Now, the thing about Soundwave SIG is that it is a long-term investment, because of the fact that it is an extremely lopsided difference between low and high SIG in terms of reflect range. Because you have to remember a couple of things. And I say this as a SIG 100 Soundwave user. There's not a lot of us. A high SIG Soundwave is a completely different bot to a low SIG Soundwave. It's one of the most game-changing SIGs in the game. However, he does need to be at high SIG in order to really rely on that shield and really integrate it into your playstyle. The good thing is that he can reflect literally anything ranged. And if you think about a typical fight, there's always lots of ranged shots coming your way. In a long fight, you might have hundreds of them coming your way. And he can reflect any kind of ranged shot at all. I mean, even like the landmine of Mixmaster Special 2 or Scorp or Soundwave's Heavy. I mean, anything ranged at all, he can reflect, okay? And so that's really, really important. At low SIG, however, it's not reliable. It'll help you out every now and then. It'll just be there to save you. The good news is you do not have to be blocking in order for it to activate. And if you end up eating a special, right? So if you were to eat, let's say, a Galvatron Special 2, you eat the first hit, you can still reflect the second hit, and that would just save you completely, right? If you want to be able to really use it and integrate it into your play style, because it does take some getting used to, because it works very much in tandem with his power gain, and his power gain takes some practice. But if you really wanted to be able to rely on it, generally speaking, you're going to want it at SIG 70+. So it's very much a long-term investment SIG with a huge reward at the end, but you would only want to invest in his SIG if you are a diehard Soundwave user. If you're not all in on Soundwave, low to mid SIG level, it's still helpful. It still helps you out sometimes. You can deal phenomenal damage with those reflect range shots, but you got to get it up to high SIG level in order for it to benefit you constantly, because once he's at SIG 100, even though it's never 100% chance, he's nearly bulletproof at that level. So it's a long-term investment, very worthwhile if you're all in on him, but if you're not, most people will just leave it at low SIG, maybe mid SIG at most. So that brings us to Rhinox. So Rhinox, his SIG is overclock. Okay, so his SIG is tied to his shielding. Of course, he's getting his shield buffs frequently throughout the fight. This has 2 components. First of all, it reduces damage while he's shielded to 60% of the opponent's attack rating, so you are taking less damage, and he will also inflict shock damage when he is shielded. So at SIG 1, he will deal about 52% as shock damage. This goes up to about 161% attack at SIG 100. So it does more than triple, okay? Now, the thing about his SIG is that it is kind of like BC's SIG in the sense that it's activating when you're getting hit, right? So BC, when he's eating melee crits, he will land major bleeds. It's a similar sort of principle here, okay? Even though there's an offensive component to Rhinox's shield, or Rhinox's SIG, it is very much a defensive SIG because you have to be getting beat up in order for it to benefit you. So most people will not feel any need to invest much into it, because obviously if you're a serious player, you're trying to improve your gameplay, maybe you already are a very good player, you're going to be dodging most of the time anyway. And so even though the shock damage does get really significant at high level, because of the fact that you have to be getting hit in order for it to benefit you, most people really won't need to invest much into it or feel any need to, because remember, you're getting that reduced damage regardless of SIG level. And even at low SIG, you're still getting, 50 to 60% attack is shock damage. You're still landing shock even at low SIG when you do get hit, right? So think of it as a safety net with some, a bonus offense thrown in. That's basically how it works. So for most people, you're not going to want to bother investing a lot into a SIG because you'll get plenty of benefit from it even at low SIG. So that brings us to Shockwave. So Shocky has his Undo. This is also a healing SIG. Okay, so his SIG has a chance to activate every time he gains a bar of power. It works very similar to Megatronus's Relic of Obedience in the sense that there's a chance every time he gains a bar of power. At SIG 1, he has about a 15% chance to heal all damage taken in the previous 4 seconds. This goes up to 35% at SIG 100. Okay? Now, the interesting thing about this SIG is that even though it's a low chance for it to activate, and as you can see, it does not scale significantly, it maxes out at a 35% chance, that's actually fine because you have to remember that he has a chance to activate it every time he gains a bar of power, and you're obviously gaining bars of power very frequently. Second of all, he will undo all damage taken in the previous 4 seconds, which means that if you were to end up eating a very big hit, if you ate a special that took 50% of your health and then undo activated, you would repair all of that health. You would recover all of it, right? Now, obviously, that's not going to happen all the time, but the healing on his undo can be significant, and that's why the chance does seem relatively low. The good news about this, though, is that you do not need at all to invest a lot into his SIG, because even at SIG 10 to 20, you're still getting, roughly 20% chance, something like that. That's fine because, like I said, he has the chance every time he gains a bar of power. So spending a very long time trying to get his SIG high wouldn't make that much of a difference, right? Because of the fact that it's really the fact that he has a chance every time he's gaining a bar of power. That's what's going to give you more chances to activate it. So it's defensive. It helps you out sometimes. There will be occasions where it results in a lot of healing. Other times it won't be very much, but it's there to help you out. And even if you are a very heavy Shockwave user, he will do just fine at low SIG level. So that brings us to Jetfire. So Jetfire's SIG is damage control. So this is another healing SIG, another circumstantial SIG. So of course his damage control systems come online when he drops to 75% health. Once he's below 75%, a couple of things happen. So his healing is triggered, of course, by blocking, which makes sense. Blocking is very central to Jetfire's kit. He's a parry bot. This is where he's getting his stuns. This is where he's getting energy charges. This is where he's getting reflection. All of that stuff, very central to his kit. Jetfire is a skill-based bot he takes getting used to, so it makes sense that his SIG would activate through blocking. But once you're below 75% health, you consume an energy charge. When you block for 1 second, you will purify burn if you have burn on you, and you will heal at SIG 1. You will heal 1.8% of your health over half a second. This goes up to 6% at SIG 100. So it does more than triple. Now, 1.8% might not sound like much, but you have to remember that you can heal over and over again. You're just holding block, and the healing can add up significantly. Now, obviously, you have to be good with him in general. You have to be able to maneuver around the arena because the opponent is obviously not always just going to want to let you stand there and block. But if you're really good with Jetfire, you've invested in him, you know his playstyle, you can get meaningful healing even at low SIG. Now, generally, the hardcore, die-hard Jetfire users will still invest more into his SIG. Getting it up to mid-level is a good idea, just because you're going to be able to heal more and more quickly, which is also good because you are vulnerable when you're just standing there blocking. So I would say most people, if you're all in on Jetfire, which a lot of people aren't because he's a bit different, but if you are, Investing some into his SIG will absolutely be worth your while because you can heal over and over again. It's great when you get into trouble, and it's really, really great for long fights. Super, super useful in that sense. Just remember that it only activates once he drops to 75%. You're not going to do that healing once you're at very high health. Okay, so finally, that brings us to Skywarp. So his SIG is cut and run. So this is a SIG that unfortunately is extremely circumstantial and in most cases will not activate often at all. I was pretty disappointed in the SIG when it came out because generally what happens with this SIG is if Skywarp has a teleport charge, he has to have at least one. He will have a chance to evade the last hit of a special attack, a special 1 and 2. There's a few problems with this. The first, of course, is that at SIG 1, it's only a 20% chance to evade. That goes up to 75% at SIG 100. The reason I have issues with this, and the reason why I don't think it's beneficial for most players, is because of the fact that he only has a chance to evade one hit of a certain kind of attack, and that's it. That's problematic, because first of all, almost all special attacks in the game, with the exception of things like MV1 Special 1 or Ultra Magnus Special 1, almost all special attacks are multiple hits. Sometimes they're many hits. And so if you end up getting tagged with let's say a 3-hit Special 1 or 2, you end up eating the first 2 hits. Well, first of all, at low SIG, the chance of you evading that last hit is very low anyway. And even if you do, you're going to take a ton of damage before you get to that final hit. In some cases, you're going to be dead. Right? So it's not going to be very beneficial. More importantly, I find that this SIG is not intuitive to the mechanics of the game because this game ultimately is really about defense. If you want to be a really good player, your defensive game, your dodging game, your sidestepping game, your ability to anticipate attacks is more important than anything else. And so learning how to dodge specials is absolutely crucial. Okay? You can't always do it, of course, but it's so important. And so most of the time, though, if you're a good player, you're going to be dodging these attacks anyway. You won't need to evade the last hit of it. And so the thing is, sure, this SIG will help you out on occasion, but again, if it's at low SIG, it's more often than not, you're not going to evade. And even if you were to spend years getting it up to a very high level, it maxes out at a 75% chance. So even at SIG 100, 3 out of 4 times it'll happen, but 1 out of 4 it won't. And so that just seems like a ridiculous investment. And I can't see most people bothering to pour much into it. Now, sure, it'll help you out occasionally. It certainly looks cool, but it's the kind of SIG that's going to be much more beneficial on the AI side. As we've all seen, when you fight against him in time slides and such, generally that is going to be SIG 100, so he's usually going to evade your special attacks, and then he can counter right away. But from the player side, most players, if you're a good player, you're going to be dodging most of those specials anyway. And even when you don't dodge a special, if you end up eating the first hit or the first several hits, you may not evade the last hit anyway, and even if you do, you've already taken a ton of damage. So it's an RNG-based SIG. It maxes out at 75%. It's only good on one hit of a particular kind of attack. So I find that if you're using Skywarp, if you like Skywarp, and he does have a lot of utility otherwise, of course, awaken him, dupe him, but it just is not going to be worth the investment for the vast majority of players, just given how specific it is and given that it's RNG based. So that wraps up the tech class. I hope this has been helpful. I will get to the final 3 classes in the next week or 2. If you have any questions, let me know, and we will speak again soon.